You're probably thinking, gee, it took him a long time to put a new video out. Well, let me take you back to a particular date that has caused some significance in my life. It was the day that my twin boys were born. And since then, my life has been a whirlwind of sleepless nights and constantly juggling babies. One advantage is I've consumed a lot of television during those times, and with TV comes a lot of exposure to different ideas. The ones that particularly took my eye are in the new series of Loki. It has some cool timeline visualizations as well as some split flap display text reveals for the locations, and I'm like, why don't we figure out how to make that? So let's jump on in with one of these elements as we look at how to create this timeline visual from the TV show and use it in a variety of ways. So here we are in a brand new project, and we're going to go to composition, new composition. We'll make it 1920, 1080, 25 frames per second, and I'm making it for a minute long, and I'm going to call this comp final because it'll be our final composition. Now we're going to create a new layer. So we'll go layer, new solid, or you can use Control or Command Y. This is going to be our matte layer. It's the size of our composition, and it doesn't really matter what color you pick. We'll hit OK. We'll go up the top to the rectangle tool, or you can hit Q, and going over to the central anchor point that we can see on our selected layer, we're going to click in the very middle, and then holding Control, drag that out until we get these sort of letterbox looks on the side, like so. Going down to the mask that's been created on our layer in our timeline, we're going to hit F to bring up the mask feather, or you can toggle the little arrow on the side, and we're going to uncheck the constrained proportions and just drag out the pixels of the feathering on those two edges like so. So you can see it's white in the middle and kind of gradients out on the side. This isn't going to black. If we toggle the transparency, we can actually see it just goes out to transparent, which is what we want for our matte. So we're going to pre-compose this whole thing. So selecting the layer, right click, hit pre-compose, and we're going to move all attributes into the new composition. We'll name this matte. And this is going to be our matte layer for all the other elements that we introduce into this scene. So we can uncheck that and instead go over and select title action safe to give us some visualizations, some grids that we can use to align the rest of our elements. So I'm going to go and select the pen tool now. You can use G to select it. We're going to click on the left sort of target spot here, and then holding Shift, click on the right. So we get this line area, and you can see it fills out. I uncheck the fill, so I click fill, hit none, and for the stroke, I'm going to make that white and scale it down to like 3 or 4 pixels. Doesn't really matter. You can adjust this to your preference. So you can see we've now drawn our line. If I hide the title action safe, it doesn't really fade out, and that's because we need to make this apply our matte layer. So we're going to select the layer, we'll rename it line while we're here, and then over in our effects and presets, we'll go to channel and select set matte. We'll drag that onto our line layer, and you'll see it gives us these options, and we want to take matte from layer and select our matte layer like so. Now if I unclick off it, you can see it's applying that transparency that we added in for our matte layer like so. So there's our line element. We'll turn the title action safe back on, and we'll now add the little circle element that's going to be part of our animation. Going back to where we selected rectangle, we'll hold down the mouse, left click and select ellipse tool. Zooming into that target, we're going to click in the very middle of that target, and then holding Control is going to scale from the center for it, and holding Shift will keep our little circle in proportion. We'll scale it out like so. We're going to then go up the top, switch the stroke to none, and then switch the fill to full, like so, and now you can see we've got a big dot. We're going to go down to the contents of our shape layer, and you can see it has this ellipse created like so. What we'll do is hit Control D to duplicate that. It's now created another one, and we're going to go to ellipse 1, the one that was originally created, and we're just going to scale the size down a little bit like so. We'll also go in there and selecting that same shape layer, go back up to where we selected our ellipse tool up the top and select a rectangle tool again. And similar to before, we're going to click in the very middle and holding Control, drag that out like so. So you can see we've got this rectangle coming in from the sides. We're going to drag the rectangle tool in our contents down underneath all the others, and then we're going to add an effect by hitting add, and we're going to add merge paths. So that adds underneath all of those, and we're going to toggle it to subtract. You can see now it's now subtracted out the second circle, so it started with a big circle. It's then subtracted the second smaller circle, and then it's also subtracted our little rectangle tool. Now this element needs one little circle in the middle, so we'll just select any of the ellipses, we'll drag it underneath the merge paths, and then we'll go into the ellipse path and the size and just scale that down a little bit like so. Zooming out, you can see it's rather large, so if we hit S on that layer, we can always scale it down to be the size that we want it to, and adjust the elements however we wish in order for it to fit. We'll scale it down a little bit more, like so. So now we have our dot added onto our elements. We'll rename that to dot. And now we need to add in the date. So we'll grab the text tool, we'll click in the middle, and we'll just type out a date. For us, 2021 is a year. Whether or not you want to remember it or not, up to you. We'll scale it up so it's nice and big. You can do whatever scale you want. And we're kind of positioning it in the middle here, above where our dot is, and just giving it a little bit of space above. Now I've picked the Futura LT condensed in the bold, and I've toggled on the all caps, which is going to make sure that I don't get any weird lowercasing, and I'm getting a nice presented layer like so. So there we have it. What we'll do is we'll grab our dot and drag our dot parent tool to the layer above, which is our text layer now, and now it's parented to that text layer, so wherever this goes, it's going to go. But you can see already, if I drag it left and right, it's also not applying that matte. So we need to make sure that we go over to our effects and presets, grab that set matte again, and toggle it to take the matte layer as our layer for its alpha. We'll do the same with the dot, going in there, adding the set matte and changing it. And now if we drag that around, you can see it fades out left and right, which is great. Now it's time to drop in some expressions. We're going to be dropping in our expressions onto our text layer, because obviously that's now controlling the left and the right, and it's also what has our source text on it. So we're going to add in a bunch of expression controls, mainly a bunch of slider controls. So I'll drop in a slider control. I'm going to hit enter to rename the slider control. I'll call this one left, and then hitting Control D, I can actually save time and duplicate that slider control and then just keep renaming it. This next one will be called center. We'll do it again, and we'll have one called right. We'll have another one, we'll call it start value. We'll have another one, we'll call it end value. We'll have another one, we'll call it value step, and we'll have a final one and we'll call it animation. So now we have a bunch of expression controls in here to control all the different elements. And you're probably wondering, what are all these for? So the first three that we have are going to control the different positions that we need to reference. We'll quickly throw those in. So selecting the text layer, we'll hit P to see our position, and you can see right here in the center, we're at 960 pixels from the left-hand side. So we're going to select center and type 960 like so. For the left-hand side, we want when our layer kind of fades all the way out, which is around here, and that's 84. So we'll go in and type 84 for the left expression control slider, and then we'll hold shift drag it all the way to the right again, and we can see for that one it's 1890. So we'll go in there, we'll type 1890 like so, and then referencing our center one, we can just type 960 to get it back into the middle. Now our start value and end value are going to be the value that we want this number to start on and the end value that we want it to end up on. So our starting value can be 2021, and our end value could be, I don't know, 1955. And the value step is going to be how many steps in between that do I want to see. So there's going to be an animation happening as we flick through the years to go from one year to the next year, and we're going to see that how many times. In this case, let's say we want to do it 5 times. Finally, our animation layer is what we're going to use to control the entire animation, which is going to be great. Running things off all one layer, always a bonus. So what we first need to do is start moving this thing around. Since we've got the position already visible by hitting P, we're going to hold Alt and click on the stopwatch to give us the expression window, and we're going to write in an expression like so. For starters, we're going to start with var step equals 100 divided by, and then using the pickwhip, we're going to select our value step, like so. So now we can see 100 referencing the total value that our animation goes up to. We'll consider that 100%, but it's really just the number 100. And we're dividing that by how many steps. This gives us how many segments of this animation are going to occur in order for us to have this many steps occur within our total animation. If we go down, we create a new variable. We're going to call it ref for reference. And we're going to open our left parentheses. Using the pickwhip, we're going to select that same animation slider, drop it in there, and then we're going to use the percentage symbol, which in this calculation is considered mod, and then we'll type the word step, close that brackets or right parentheses, use the divided by step as well. And what we're doing here is we're actually figuring out how many times this is happening.
I beg your pardon?
Sounds a little confusing, and once we see it in action, it'll be a lot more easy to understand. Next, we're going to add a if conditional, and we're going to say if reference is greater than 0.5, then we are doing something else, we'll do something else. And classic me, we're going to be using linear expressions, one of our favorites. If you want to know more about linear expressions, you can find out all about them by checking out this tutorial that I've done here. Otherwise, we'll keep going along here. We'll a variable, I'm going to define it as var res for result equals linear, and then we're writing our linear equation in here. We're going to start by what it's referencing is ref, and it's going between 0.5 and 1. And we're going to say when we're traveling between 0.5 and 1, we want to be traveling between our left value by pickwhipping our left slider, hitting the comma, and then the center slider, like so. Now we'll do the same in the else section. We'll do var res equals linear for our linear equation again, ref as our controller, and then we'll go 0 as our min, 0.5 as our max, and then we're traveling from the center to the right, like so. Now down at the bottom, we need to obviously define the value of our position by saying our position will be equal to res, and then we'll just reference this y value so we got a bit more control over it by saying transform.position square bracket 1 square bracket, and then we'll close that off as a square bracket as well. So we've got res doing our x-axis, and we're just taking the y-axis from what's already there. If we unclick, we can see nothing's going to happen because we haven't animated our animation slider. But if I drag this forward, you can see, okay, it's moving off to the right, and oh, it's coming in on the left. Off to the right, in on the left, off to the right, in on the left. And you'll see this animation is actually going to happen 5 times. If I drop this down to 3, you can see it happens 1, 2, 3 to end us there. So you can see we've got the ability to control how many times we're seeing a date fly by as we're animating our animation. So that is the position all taken care of. Now all we need to do is add an expression to the source layer to change what the number is as we cycle through all that. So we'll toggle down the text until we get to source text, and holding Alt, clicking on the stopwatch, we can write our expression for our source text. We'll start with var step, and you'll see that this is familiar because it's what we defined step as being in our previous one as well. So 100 divided by the value of our step. We'll now say var ref is something slightly different. We're going to do math.floor, open the brackets, and we'll write in there, pickwhip the animation again, and divide by step. Now we have a reference that's referencing how we're going along with this value, and using the math.floor to get rid of any decimals, always rounding down with any decimal values. And then we're going to say var source is equal to, and we'll put this in a bracket as well. We will select the animation, we'll go mod or percentage symbol, step, bracket, divide by step, And you'll see this source is pretty much exactly the same as what the reference is in the position. But we've already created a reference for our animations and everything else that needs to be calculated. So source is just something else that we can refer to. So now we're going to write a quick conditional here. We're going to say ref is equal to source greater than 0.5 question mark ref plus 1 colon ref. And this is actually an if-else statement. You can see with the question mark, we're saying if this value, source greater than 0.5, if this is true, then we want ref to equal ref plus 1. Otherwise, just have it equal ref. And it saves us a little bit of space in this view. Now we'll go down, we'll go to value. We're going to go math.floor. Again, we're going to wrap our linear equation in here. So we'll type linear. So you can see we have a linear equation, and then whatever the result of our linear equation, we're getting rid of any decimals by going to floor. So rounding it down. So for the linear equation, we're going to refer to ref. That's why we called it ref. We're going to hit comma. Our low point is 0, or our min point rather. Our max point is going to be our value step. So our reference is going to be going from 0 and counting how many times we loop through until we get to our value step of 5 for having flicked through 5 times. And essentially, we're just going to say we want you to start at the start value by pick whipping that, comma, and we want you to end at our end value, like so. Also add in, essentially, if I'm starting at the start, I can also hide what I'm doing. So if ref equals 0, make the value nothing. This is more in line with what the TV show does, where you've got a blank number at the start, and then as you loop through, that's when you start getting your numbers coming through. If you want to see your year number from the start, you don't need this. We can get rid of it, and you can see there's our starting number. And then as we animate through, you can see it flicks through the dates until it gets to the last one. So let's go ahead and animate our animation slider. So I'm going to come forward a little bit to give a little bit of time for the animation that shows this text or these graphical elements. I'm going to click the stopwatch on my animation slider. If I hit U, it'll bring that up. I can see that there. Then I'll just go forward a little bit, find where 100 is, or rather just type 100 in. And there we go. We've got a little animation in there. If I hit F9, I can start easing with it, and it gives me this little arm. I can drag that out to kind of speed that up or slow that down. And you can see if I do that, it kind of comes in, slows down onto that element. If I want to slow down that animation, I can always drag it out where it ends like so. Or I could even go in here, find the point a couple before, go in here and type like 100.2, drop it in like so. And then it's kind of going to go in over the top and then come back like so. So it kind of rushes its way towards the number, and then once it gets there, it kind of slows down and returns back like so. So that is the start of that animation. Let's go in there and we'll add in the reference again. So then we're starting at the start, and we can just animate in these elements. So for the dot, we'll go forward to just before our animation starts. We'll hit S to do the scale, and we'll drop it down forward a few frames like so. So I've done a keyframe at like 2 seconds, 3 seconds, where it's 0, and then it comes in for another couple of seconds, and then our animation can start. And same with the line. I'll find our line layer, hit S, I'm going to uncheck the constraint proportions, hit the scale, stopwatch, go forward to do some keyframes. So my last keyframe is going to be at 100 and 100, and then go forward, and I'm just going to scale it in the X-axis like so, and then it kind of comes in like so. If I wanted to give a little bit of space, I can always drag those keyframes for my animation forward like so. And I could even come in here and adjust this to give it a little bit of speed into going into that animation like so. What I can also do is add on the motion blur, and that's definitely going to make this a whole lot more dynamic, where you can see the dates flying by, zoom, 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 until I get to that final date at the end like so. Finally, to finish replicating the animation that we saw in the TV show, we're going to go forward and add in a little ellipse. We'll drag it out by holding Control and Shift like so, and we'll change the fill to none, and we'll change the stroke to on, and we will scale this from 0 out a whole heap like so. Double tapping U, we can see the different controls that we have changed. In this case, we're going to go to the stroke width at the end, click the stopwatch, go forward, hit the little add keyframe, and halfway through, we'll just fatten her up. And then we're also going to select that layer, hit Shift T to bring up the opacity. We'll go forward, click opacity, go forward on the scale, add another opacity. Selecting both of those will make them 0, and then about halfway through, we'll make the opacity like 80. You can see we get that pulse there of this thing coming in and out. We can always adjust some of these elements out a little bit in order to make that animation appear a bit easier. And then what we'll do is we'll duplicate that layer, move it forward slightly, double tap U and make the size a little bit smaller. And so we can see it gives us that element kind of coming in twice, which is cool. We'll also like reduce the stroke amount on that one, so it can go from 1 to 8 to 1. And there you go, we get this little pulsing element coming up. You can see it comes along and slides along, and there we have it. Got that nice smooth animation. So if you wanted to do that with any dates, you could do that there. It's pretty smooth and pretty easy. But let's go one step further. If you're interested in adding actual dates rather than just years, let's just take this one step further. We're going to create a couple extra text layers to do so. We'll create one date and we'll say June 13, 2021, the date that I am recording this animation. And let's add another text layer, and we'll call this one, I don't know, November 5th, 1955. The classic day that Doc Brown created time travel. So we'll say that we're using the June 13th date in our text layer. We're going to rename that to start date, and we'll call the other one end date. So now we've got two reference layers. We can toggle them off because we don't need to see them anymore. Going to our text layer, we'll hit U to see the effects that we've written, or rather the expressions. We'll go now to our source text, and we're going to add in a few little extra things. What we'll do is we'll add in a reference point for the different months. In this case, it's an array of strings. You can see here I've put var months equals Jan, Feb, March, April. I'm not going to type it all out, that's why I've copied and pasted it, but you can see visually what it should look like there. Next, we're going to create two new references. We're going to go var start date is equal to new date, left parentheses, and then we're going to pickwhip. If we show the source text for these two text layers, we're going to say the start date is equal to the source text of our start date, like so. We'll close that off, like so, and then we'll duplicate that and rename it to say that our end date is equal to the source text of our end date, like so. So you can see we've got start date and end date, and they've created two date objects. Next, we're going to go to our existing value reference that we've got that was creating our content. Instead of it calculating to value, we're going to say it's now equal to a new variable called date time. And we're going to go in here. We're going to leave reference 0 and the value step alone because it's still calculating stuff we need to know. And we're just going to change the last two. So it instead is going to go from a start date.getTime, left parentheses, right parentheses, we'll go comma, and then we'll go to end date dot get time, left parentheses, right parentheses. Now note time is a capital because it needs to be, it's a function, but the G is lowercase. Next, we are going to create another variable. We're going to call it presented. We're going to go say that presented is a new date created from datetime. We're going to do var full year. So var full year is a new variable. We're going to say it's equal to quotation mark, plus presented dot get full year, left parentheses, right parentheses. So this is going to give us the full year, kind of like what we're seeing right now from the new calculated date of presented. But we need to still set our value. And we'll say our value is equal to presented dot get date, which is going to give us the day of a month, plus quotation mark, space quotation mark, gives us a space between that result. We'll say plus months, so referring back to that array that we created, and we're going to use presented dot get month, like so, to get us the month in our array. Then we'll go plus, we'll do the same thing. We're going to use a double quotation, hit space, single quotation, then double quotation, then plus full year. So our full year variable that we created here, dot substring or substr, left parentheses 2, 2. So we're selecting 2 values from our substring and it's 2 characters in of our string. And there we go. We can get rid of this value like so and spit that out. And you can see now we've got our 2 dates. If we turn our dates on to see, we can see it's calculating from the 13th of June 2021, and as we go forward it is flicking through dates until it gets to our date here, November 5, 1955, and it could be whatever date we wanted to. We could do November 1st, 2000. You'll see it adjusts like so. We can have a start date, anything, December 25th, 2026. Drop that in and you can see it'll cycle through. And again, we could have hidden this first value if we wanted to, otherwise we can animate it in, whatever we want to do there. And we can always control elements like so. We can go in and say we're only flicking through 3 different values, and if we preview that, you'll see that it only flicks through, making it super easy to create different dates that they flick through in order to get this animation happening, which is super cool. So whether you want to do single years or you want to do complete dates, you've got it at your fingertips. And I've abbreviated the year to comma 00, but we can always go in there and change that as well by simply just, instead of taking full year substr and using the single quotation in this double quotations, we can just make that quotations with a single space and then simply spit out full year as a whole. And you can see there we go, we've got the dates year in full. So that's how you create this effect with the text going through. But you can see it makes a really cool animation. You've got a lot of control over it, your start, your right, your all these different things all going on, and it creates a really cool date look like you have seen in Loki. Don't forget to check out my other Loki video on how to create that split flat display text reveal that they use to show different locations. Until next time, my name is Bench. Thanks for watching.